Use addition properties. Knowing the addition properties can help you evaluate or find the value of numerical and algebraic expressions. What are some things that you know about adding? Like maybe some, what do you think some properties of adding are? Like what makes adding unique in all the operations you could perform? Tyler. Sure, you can basically you can add any two numbers you want, any three numbers, any 10 numbers. Okay, all numbers are compatible with addition. Sure, it's not always true with division, so good. What else, Josiah? There are different properties, Brianna. Did you know that when you walked in? Or are you just looking in your book? What is the associative property? Well, all right, fine. Elia. It doesn't matter the order in which you decide you're going to add, right? So adding can be done in any order, which is going to be a very important component to the properties that we're going to learn about today. You are going to have to learn the names of these properties, and you're going to have to learn what makes them unique. First one is the commutative property of addition. Okay? And that's found right in that big box on page 22. Commutative property tells us that the order in which numbers are added does not affect their sum. Okay? Basically, the order numbers are added does not affect their sum. Sum again was what? What does sum mean? Answer when you do what? I see a lot of people with like their faces down and their arms. When I write up here, why do you suppose I do it? Here, let's do math this way. We'll just turn off the smartboard and I'll just explain it to you. Would you like that? Then copy the notes. These are notes. If I write something on the board, you're writing it in your notes. It's that simple. It's called active participation. It's not called, like, you didn't pay $7 to watch a movie here. There's no one coming around selling you peanuts or popcorn. I'm not good at math. Well, yeah, because you're just staring at the ground. You're not actively participating. Hey, coach, let me just watch you dribble. Let me just watch you shoot. See how well I do at basketball if I can't ever like actively try some of the things that we're doing. Helps keep you involved. Helps make sure you don't lose track of what we're doing, that you don't fall out of attention. This is what we do. An example of the commutative property is this. And yes, just because I wrote it in green doesn't mean you don't have to copy it. A plus 3 is the same thing as 3 plus 8. Prime example of the commutative property. Any questions about the commutative property? Yeah, question? Well, this one is specifically, yeah, you're going to find out, Gianna, that once we go through multiplication properties, there's going to be a commutative property of multiplication. Okay? But, you know, specifically it's called that property of multiplication, not addition. So, yeah. the concepts are very similar. Because the concepts in addition and multiplication are very similar, right? Okay, so way to catch that. That's good. Next one is the associative property. Okay, the associative property. The associative property tells us the way numbers are grouped does not affect their sum. The way numbers are grouped does not affect their sum. Trey, what is it? Hurry up. I will check it, okay? But it was credit, so I'll give you credit for it being finished. How come you didn't have it in the folder this morning? Like, what's the matter with you? Yeah, why wasn't it in the folder? Now, what's the difference between the associative property and the commutative property? What's the major difference between those two? Because they kind of say the same thing, but they're not exactly the same. Brianna, Miss Associative Property Expert.
The associative property, you're grouping them, but the commutative, you're not really grouping them.
Okay, can you explain what that means?
Um,
What does grouping them means? What do you see up there that shows grouping? Yeah. So if you're using the associative property, chances are you're adding more than just two numbers together. Like here, the example is we're adding 2, 6, and 4, not just 2 and 6. Okay? So if I go 2 and 6, I get 8. Add that 8 to 4, I get 12, right? But here, whoops, should be equal. Here, if I add the 6 and 4 first, I get 10. Add the 2 to 10, I still get 12. Doesn't matter which ones I decide to do first. And order of operations tells us that as well. That I can add in any, or if I'm just adding, I can do whatever order I see fit. Because some of you might relate better to this one. Because you may not even see them grouped. What you might see is this and say, okay, solve it. And the associative property says, all right, you've got 3 numbers to add. Maybe you relate better to seeing the 6 and the 4 because that gives you 10. 10 is much easier to add to 2 than maybe some of you think 8 is to 4. So these properties are there, but they're also there to help you, and you can use them as tools to better your success with some of these problems. You know, all our brains work a little bit differently, and some of us have an easier time with certain numbers than others. The associative property allows you to kind of pick and choose what you think is going to work best. And it really comes into play, Gianna, when we start working with multiplication. Okay? And you say, oh, well, what's going to be easiest for me to work with? The last one is the identity property. It's the identity property. And that one's in your book there. Okay? And the identity property, the sum of any number in 0 is that number. Okay, so for example, they have 5 plus 0 is equal to 5. Okay, the sum of any number, in this case, any number is 5. 5 and 0 is going to give me 5. Like, what's your ID? What's an ID? What's an ID card? Yeah.
It's like an identification card to tell you like who you are.
Who you are, what you look like. Okay. So if you had, maybe you visited like Fountain of Youth, and you had your driver's license picture taken, your identification, because we usually use your driver's license, and there were 0 changes to you from the time you had your picture taken to the present time. 0 changes. You'd be the same one. You'd be the same person. You plus 0 changes equals you. Your identity didn't change. Neither did the number when you added it to 0. Identity property is pretty easy. Can you look ahead, Jayana, and think there is an identity property with multiplication, but do we use 0 for that identity property with multiplication? What happens if I use 0 multiplication? Right, so what number would I use? Think. Think very carefully. What number would you multiply that number by to keep your identity the same? Think. Yes. Any number times 1 is going to be that number, right? Okay. All right, so time to put it into practice. Page 23. Now that we got all these properties written down, got to practice number 1, complete, and then tell us the property that you used or what property told you it was okay. So number 1, blank plus 7 is equal to 7 plus 3. What's the missing number? What property does it show? CJ, 3 is the missing number. On what property is that? Commutative property. Very good. 2. 3 plus 2 plus 5 is equal to 3 plus blank plus 5. What's the missing number, Anthony?
7.
Tyler? JJ? 2. And what property is that? Associative. It's the associative because in the first side, we grouped the 3 and the 2. The second side, we grouped the 2 and the 5. It would not matter which we decided to do as long as we added correctly. Okay? Associative property says that's okay. Anthony? No, not with associative. 3. Right? Don't abbreviate associative. You're going to get in trouble. 3. 0 plus 3,000 or 3.25, or is it 3,000? Regardless. Lucas, what's the missing number? And what property said that that was it? Very good. 4. 18 plus 3 plus 9, blank, plus 18 plus 3. What's the missing number, Georgia? 9. And what property? Careful. Just because you saw the parentheses doesn't necessarily mean it's fully associative. Did the grouping change? Look at your book. Don't look in the sky. Did the grouping change? The numbers inside the parentheses changed. You're looking at your book.
No.
No. So the way we grouped them didn't change, but the order in which we added them did, which doesn't make it associative, but it makes it commutative. So be careful. They're going to try to trick you. Automatically seeing parentheses doesn't guarantee it's going to be associative, so you got to be on your toes. Okay? Now, let's kind of skip down to the bottom portion, numbers 11 through 19. Evaluate, which means solve, and then identify the property that you use. Do numbers 11 and 12. Solve them and tell the property you used to solve them. 11. 3 plus 65 plus 12. What did you do? What was your final answer? What property did you demonstrate? Tyler. And why would you choose that method? What was 65 and 12? And then 77 plus 3 was what? 80. And what property was that? You used the commutative property. You changed the order. Okay? Sure. Fred. Right. Okay, so and what property was that? So you can either call it commutative or you call it associative. Because if it were me, I would say I would do this first and then add to the 65. But it doesn't matter what I would do in this situation because the properties themselves tell you you can kind of do them however you want. What works best for any of you might not work for somebody else. Okay? So we just saw that. Okay? We just saw that. Bottom line, we're looking at 80 as a final. How about 12? 78 plus 10 plus 12. Now this one might be a little bit more cut and dry, but again, it all depends on how you see it. Jayana. So you just kept it the way it was. Okay? So maybe, I don't know, maybe what property? Associative, you group the first two. Okay. Anyone else do it a different way? CJ?
I did 78 plus 10.
Mason?
I did the 10 and the 12 first, but it would still be associated. And I'll put the parentheses there.
Okay. Anyone do the 78 and the 12?
Yeah.
Okay. 78 and 12 should give us what, 90?
Yeah.
Plus another 10 is 100. Okay. Associative, depending, commutative. I think it's more associative than anything else, especially when you got three things we're adding together. But how about number 13? As you look at number 13, 39 plus 0 plus 9.72. What stands out in this one that's different than what we've been using, what we've been doing? Josiah. Oh, the decimal stands out to you. Okay. Fred? 0. So we got two things that stand out. We got the decimal and the 0. All right. Now, as far as properties are concerned, Josiah, which one should stand out a little bit clearer? The 0 because of the identity property. But we still have three things we're adding together. So the identity property tells us that, whatever that number is added to 0 is going to be that number. So if we're going to use the identity property, then what are we going to do? Then we're going to do it this way. because then I have to find out what that number is before I can add it to 0. Okay? What is 39 plus 9? 48, and then the decimal portion just gets added onto it, 4872. Okay? Now, in some regards, you may even want to consider this to be somewhat what other property? Associative. So it's rare, especially for the work you'll be doing, it's rare that you just use like one property, and that's it. Here, it's obvious that, yeah, at some point we're going to use the identity property, but we also had to group them a certain way before we could get to the identity property. So it's a little bit associative, a little bit identity, but the bottom line is whatever you can use to help make the work a little bit easier for you, okay? It's like if you ever had to do a project, maybe you had to do something around the house, maybe you were given the job to clean your room, okay? It would be foolish, not foolish, yeah, maybe it would be unwise to just go at it and not think about a plan of attack first. Like, okay, I'm going to take a look and see what makes the most sense to do first. Like, I'm not going to vacuum first before I start moving around a bunch of stuff that's going to fall on the floor. Like, I'm not going to vacuum, okay, I got to clean the kitchen after dinner, okay? I got 3 kids. They're messy as can be. No matter how many times you tell them to eat over their plate, there's still like a ton of crumbs. Okay, the baby gets a pass, the other 2 don't, but still. So there's a ton of stuff underneath. So am I going to sweep underneath the table before I wipe off the table? I'm going to think about it first and try to make it as easy as possible. The job still gets done. That's the bottom line. The job still gets done, and I have to do less work to get it done. I know how much of you like to do less work, or the least amount of work as possible. Sometimes all it just takes is some better planning. You're going to get some problems today. Look at it first. Decide what you think is going to be the best route, and not just the easiest, but the best and the easiest for you to get it correct. Okay? So take a look at these things. Here, I'm going to give you, look at the practice side 1.8. Not the homework side, look at the practice side. Practice side, practice side. Practice side. There we go. Evaluate, which in the examples we did in class meant what? Solve. Give me an answer. Do it, whatever you want to think. And then identify the property or properties you used. So number 1, the way they have it lined up for you is 37 plus 12 plus 23, and they group off the 12 and 23. Now, you don't have to follow that model if you think that there might be an easier way for you to add those 3 numbers together. I think there is, personally. If it were me, I would take a quick look at the 37 and the 23, because I got a 7 in the ones place and a 3 in the ones place. I put them together, I get 10. So 37 and 23 should give me how much? 60. 60. If I add the 30 and the 20, I get 50, but I also add the 7 and the 3, which is another 10, which is 60. 60 then plus 12 is what? Okay, so on my line, right underneath this problem, I'm going to put 72, and then I'm going to put, what property did I use? Associative. Did I abbreviate with an A?
No.
Did I abbreviate with an A and 2 letters after? Good. All right, so any questions there? Now, there are 14 of them. 1 through 14. There are 14 that are like that. All I want you to do, pick 10. No, the extra 4 aren't extra credit. Pick 10. What do I want you to do? If I say pick 10, what do I want you to do? Oh, simpletons.